to this episode of RTX. I'm joined by Richard Cashman, aka the Sport In. So welcome to the show today, Rich. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for asking me to be a member.
You're absolutely welcome. So for those who aren't aware of who you are, give us a bit of a background info into your kind of journey so far in coaching, how you got involved, your educational background, etc.
A bit of background on myself is I was brought up in a little village in North Wales called Caernarfon. About 100 people live here. It's very tiny. I'm 23 years old. A very ambitious individual. I want to be the best person I possibly can, and whether that could be coaching, teaching, it has to be around involving kids. I got interested in coaching when I attended college. I found the essence of being a leader quite easy to come by, and I often took over in practical elements of college. So I was given an opportunity to coach in college. I was given an opportunity to coach in a local soccer schools, which I found it easy to not teach, but to be in front of a group and express what I wanted them to know. But the teaching was fairly new to me, and I found that something of a challenge because I wanted to get my message across. So over the years, I've gained that experience of how to teach and how to learn the learning process, if that makes sense. So I was 17, having my first opportunity to coach in college and my local team. But I sort of understood then when to intervene, what to say, how to say it. But as I grow older and more experienced, I've become better, I think.
Okay. So where did that lead you to in terms of education-wise and kind of experiences?
Education-wise, I attended college, as I mentioned. I completed the BTEC diploma. Then I thought, why not go to university? It wasn't planned, wasn't an aim of mine, but I attended university, and thankfully after 3 years of university I graduated with a degree. This year I've come home from America and I've put an application in to do my Masters in Liverpool, England, and I've been accepted, so in September I'll be starting my Masters degree. In terms of coaching, Cardiff down South Wales, from North Wales, I coach in a local company called Goal Centres, where I coached from under 6 to under morning, like a fun session on a Saturday morning. Then I coached in parties, which was very different, to be honest, because parents would come up to you and demand a certain type of party. So there wouldn't be a session plan, there wouldn't be anything, you just turn up and parents would be demanding some kind of activity. That was fairly hard to adjust and get used to. I worked for a Welsh organisation called IRIS, which was on one evening a week and coach multi-ability kids, and just through the medium Welsh. So my first language is Welsh.
All right.
So second language is English. So coaching Welsh is different because I'm used to coaching in English. Then I had an opportunity to coach at my university at the academy level, which is fairly good. The kids would come in from the Cardiff area and work with our coaches that were doing their theory element and then put that theory into practice. I was then, through contacts and networking in Cardiff, I found a guy called Lloyd Jones who ran the Cardiff City Foundation. He gave me a volunteering role, which I turned up to every week, very enthusiastic, wanted to learn from everyone. Then one of their coaches, who was called Chris Carr, now is the first team fitness coach for Bristol City, moved on. So I had this role as the U9's foundation coach, which was exciting for me. It was one of the biggest roles I had. So I had to work with them every Friday evening and then take them to play against different centres. But I had to abide by their philosophy, get used to how they wanted me to work, which at times, in my personal, I became more of a robot. Then through Christian Edwards at Cardiff Met University, he provided me an opportunity to coach with the men's 4 team. So that was contrasting ages where I coached from under 6 to 27 years in the university team. After graduating from university, I thought, what better to do than travel to America and coach soccer there. I tend to call it soccer now. So I went to a company called Youth Elite Soccer, and they would then put me through a summer camp session in the summer. Then through spring and fall, I would coach in a club called Shelton Youth Soccer, and then I would work as a travel coach. They call it a player development officer. Until now, so I'm home right now. Just returned from America in last November. I've just had my first job here back in the UK as a teaching assistant in a local high school, working with kids, and I work time as an academy coach in my local academy.
Okay, so a big kind of wealth of experience in terms of ages coached and the kind of different contexts, I guess, both here and in the States.
Yeah, the biggest contrast I really have found that utterly bizarre in terms of here we tend to play one or two sports. In terms of America, they will play 6 or 7. But America is a pay-to-play system. Over here, you don't pay as much, or sometimes more or less it's free. So I found that very bizarre. And just for the outright elite in America, it's all about making money. Over here, it's about participation and eventually being competitive. I found that two contrasting views interesting.
Okay. So in terms of your philosophy on coaching, so obviously you coach a variety of ages. What's your kind of general coaching philosophy when you're coaching, I guess, from under 9s right up to the kind of more senior kind of guys?
That's an interesting question. When I was in America, I was fortunate to live with a professor, and she asked me the same question. I never really thought about philosophy until only recently, and I've worked with her to sort of get my views on a philosophy based. So I've gathered some notes, and especially the younger ages, my philosophy would be about level participation. If they continue to show up session after session, season after season, falling in love with the game, then after that, then we can start to teach them slowly about the game, work as a team. It's just simply not about winning, it's about creating a player, creating a team. So with the young ages, that would be my philosophy. And as they grow older, naturally winning takes over, or becomes an important factor of the game. But I still would reiterate the part of being participation based, because in my experiences, I was late in starting soccer. I was 11 years old when I started, so I missed the initial stages of when it was meant to be fun. I went straight into the competitive side. So when I was 18, all I experienced was competitive. We have to win. So that was a big part of why I stopped playing, because I really didn't fall in love with the game first. So that's where my philosophy comes from my experiences. But with the older boys, I've got key components of how I wanted them to play. So shall we discuss them?
Yeah, go for it.
So with probably the late teens and adult, I would probably have components such as purposeful possession. So we keep possession for a purpose, not just solely because we want to be ticky-tack and play around, going nowhere. With the older ones, we play through the six, so we would play from the back, we would play from defence, and we would move the ball up in terms of building, generating the ball, having superiority in the centre of the field, and just move the ball for a purpose so we can move the opponent team. We'd focus on long-term athlete development or player development. We'd focus on manipulating the ball under pressure, so we'd get that pressure right away, not being worried or anxious in possession, being comfortable, deciding what to do before the ball comes to you. So intelligence. The process of becoming a better player would far outreach the outcome of the game. Whether we win or loss, players would understand what they've done well, what we've improved, what needs to be improved for the next game. Understand the team ethos. We want to be a team. There's no Johnny in the left back is better than everyone in the team. It's about the team and plays a part. Having that tactical understanding of the game, whether that would be through personal analysis, would be through technology. I would educate the parents. That's a big thing. That's the sporting influencer right there. We want to educate the parents regardless of the age. We want them to understand the game, how we play, so they understand what the game's about instead of having contrasting views. I would have effective communication between all parties involved, whether that's the player, parent, grandparent, coaches, academy director, first team coach, all the people, that stakeholders involved. Effective communication is key, so we're on the right page. And last and not least, I would use diverse coaching methods in order to get this message across. I wouldn't use the same one. I'd use guided discovery. I would be quite restrictive in the way I teach. In other parts, I'd be quite letting the kids decide what to do. Just diverse in the way I teach things.
Fantastic. That's some of those things that I picked up through your blog. It's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to get you on here. Was your kind of emphasis on the kind of more process-based coaching rather than the outcome-based, and that's something that I think really comes out in your blog. So I wanted to talk to you a bit more about that. So tell us about the kind of side project you've got on in terms of your kind of the sporting influencer. So how did that come to be? What's the kind of your aim for that?
The sporting influencer came about when I was in America, and I really observe the extent of parental involvement in sport, whether that would be soccer, or ice hockey. The extent of parental involvement was from one extreme to the other. We would have an outstanding parent who was educated and understood, if I'm the right role model for my child, he might participate longer, he'd enjoy the game longer. And you had the extreme opposite, where the father was a high school player, a college player, where he wanted to play the game through his son's eyes. So after speaking to the Professor Valley Worley down on the Frio, the guys I get to meet and network with, I wanted firstly to write a book, and they advised me that I'm a nobody and nobody would buy my book, nobody would read my book. I have blogs and get my message across through blogs and create an audience. So sport and influence is about educating the parents of how to approach youth sports and enhancing a child's level of enjoyment and participation in sport. And if they can understand that, the kids will have a better chance of playing the game for longer, falling in love with the game, and have a better relationship with their parents in terms of in the house, on the field, in the car, ride home. That's the sporting influencer.
So how long has that project been going for you now?
I started writing when I was in America, October, and I started publishing blogs around after Christmas. I started my Facebook page about 2 months ago, the Twitter page. So it's fairly new, it's fairly in the initial stages of trying to be exposed and having the attention and people acknowledging the blogs and appreciating them and understanding what the blog's about.
I think from what I've seen, you're being quite modest in that because you've had around 10,000 hits now the last few months or so, haven't you?
Slowly, I'm getting people to share, slowly people to understand. What I'm finding difficult and I want to change in some aspects of the blogs is sometimes the blogs are too long, and sometimes I find that typically parents or typically people that have full-time jobs find it difficult to sit down for a period of 10 minutes to read a blog or might get bored. I want to find more engaging ways to engage in the blog or a video clip. So I try to be diverse in what I upload in pictures and videos, in short blogs, short stories, make it realistic. And I want to back all my sayings and statements with science, because they want to know that it comes from somewhere. I'm not just purely saying it for the fun of it. It's backed up by research and science from past decades to current research.
I'm glad you kind of mentioned the videos, because there was one thing I wanted to pick up, which I found on your blog, which I thought was a fantastic exercise. And I presume it was with some kids you were coaching in America, which is where you basically reversed the roles and had the kids on the sideline and the parents playing. So talk to me a bit about that.
So I was speaking to the professor, and we wanted to find an intriguing way, a unique way to educate the parents in terms of how they would feel if they were on the field. And she came up with an idea of reversing the roles. I wasn't quite sure how the parents would react to it. So all I said to begin with, there's a game, parents be parents, and the children will just watch. So all the parents are excited to play and be quite competitive. So they turned up, and I got the parents to communicate with them and said, from now on when you play, the kids, the parents, they get to shout what they hear from the sideline at you. They will stand in a position where you are playing on the field, and they will shout everything they hear on a Saturday and a Sunday at you as loud as they want. Then we'll see how much you can concentrate and focus on the game. If you get distracted, imagine how a 9-year-old boy would feel or a girl would feel. You're an adult right now, imagine how they would feel. So we had all the kids placed around the field in where their parent would play, and they would just shout everything they would hear from the sideline. The parents wouldn't concentrate, the passes were good everywhere, they were trying to yell to get the ball. It was very interesting to see that part. But the kids were quite anxious to begin with because they thought they would get in trouble for shouting. So we made a promise that everything they shout, they don't get in trouble when they get home. So the kids were fine about it, but the parents really then understood the concept of trying to be quiet on the sideline, be encouraging, not to tell them what to do all the time. They need to focus purely on the game. If they make a mistake, the child wants to know they've done a mistake. They already naturally know they've made a mistake instinctively. They don't need me or them to shout at them. So the parents from then point understood what I was trying to educate them about. So after that, the parents were just quiet on the sideline.
Fantastic. So that was quite well received then from the parenting point of view.
I have to say that group of parents, that's one of my successes. I guess your question was changing a mentality in the US, specifically with the team I coached. I coached 4 teams over there, but specifically with the U10 team I had, which I started with 9s, they eventually went to U10. I changed the mentality in that team from American-driven, American football, winning at all costs in any way possible, to try and develop the boys. We play really through the thirds. If they lost possession in defence, we would learn how then to keep the ball, to keep it under pressure. And the parents would understand game by game what our objectives were, what our targets were. So they would then, if you see a kid trying to accomplish the targets we set, they applaud them, not purely and solely clapping at the goal or the assist. They would clap at small things like passing, turning under pressure. They would then understand the whole objective of the game. So that's one of my biggest successes, is how I changed their mentality. But in contrasting views, one of my failures, I think, was I took a team over through halfway through the season because one of the coaches left, and I generally thought they would be the same. Mm-hmm. I treated them with the same sort of mentality as the last group, and I went in there and straight away changed everything overnight. Instead of one layer at a time, implementing things slowly, approaches, beliefs slowly. The kids even found it hard to change their beliefs overnight, and it had the reverse effect. The parents didn't quite like it. The parents just wanted to win, and that's one of my biggest failures in terms of I should have assessed the situation better in terms of one layer at a time. These might be different, and over a period of time, then they would be educated, because that's what happened with the other group. They took time over a period of 2 years. With the new group, I thought they'd be the same. I thought, yeah, that's it. And in the space of 3 months, it went the reverse effect, and it didn't quite work out that way.
So kind of maybe being a bit wiser at picking your battles.
Yeah, picking my battles, and I thought next time I'd probably, in retrospect, pick down layers slowly, one thing at a time, and implement them slowly. I think the parents got overwhelmed by all the articles I was sending once a week. We were doing articles a week. The parents would receive an article about development in soccer, about parental sideline behaviour, something like a homework for parents, and it was well received in the other team. But the new team, they were like, why should I read? Why should I be involved? So the whole process would start again, but it wouldn't quite work the same to its effect as the first team. So that's probably one of my biggest failures in terms of rushing things, and being too judging a book by its cover in that sense.
Okay. So it's an interesting concept, because obviously I think we've all seen those kind of posters on the internet at rugby matches and football matches, kind of saying, this isn't the World Cup, the referees are human, these are kids, and they're here to have fun, which is, I think, a really important message for the kind of developmental level ages. And in fact, when I was at Wolverhampton Wanderers, they often had matches that parents weren't invited to.
Yeah.
So it was a parent-free match for that exact reason, to just let players play without judgment and that kind of situation.
In this country, there's not a stigma. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but in academy soccer over here, parents will be quiet because it's an elite team. But if you put that child and that parent in a local team, they'd be completely different. They'd have a completely different mentality. I've seen it locally, I've seen it regionally, I've seen it state-wise, where they've been removed from an elite program into like a localized team, and they're completely different. Contrasting views I quite don't understand. But in America, there isn't really an academy setup there, all locally based until you get to Premier, which is the highest point you could play at youth level. And then you would play state-wise and go out of state to play. Then you'd reach high school and college. So that's their pyramid of success in terms of participation and elite. Over here, you get obviously scouted to academy teams, and so there's a little more education system for the parents if they reach an academy. I don't see if from my experiences, I haven't seen academy clubs educate parents. They tend to neglect them, avoid them, which parents play an important role in the child's development in the team. They need to be educated, or they need to be shown a way to be not a better parent, but to affect the game in a way, or affect the child in a better way.
Absolutely. It's really interesting. There was a resource you shared. I'm not sure how long ago you shared. I took that and implemented it into a blog that I just released this week about the 4 different sport parents that coaches hate to have, basically. But it's a really interesting resource you shared, a questionnaire from, I presume it was an American organisation, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's an American organisation. It was an American National High School Association, where they really emphasise parental involvement, and they provide free courses for parents to become a better sporting influencer or better involved in sports, in terms of educating them, in terms of being a better parent on the sideline. Not only a parent, but a spectator and observe the game and allowing their child to improve in the game. So they do share these questionnaires. Isn't it a great website to go to? Is the High School of America Association, which many coaches and parents should go and check it out and use. And
yeah, it's an issue because it's obviously it's a big problem I think in a lot of youth sports. Is actually the kid is not the issue, the parent is the issue a lot of the time, and it's actually it's difficult to kind of challenge that. It's not always something coaches are comfortable to do. So
that's what I found as feedback from coaches, especially locally here. One of the biggest challenges is something I'm very passionate about is educating the parents. And over here locally, I found it coaches will say that's not my role, but as a coach, it is your role to get the best out of a child, and to get the best out of that child, the parent is involved. They see that child a lot more than the coach does. But we need to educate the parents to be on the right same page as the club or the philosophy of the club or the academy, so they share the same views. So the kid will come and they will understand the coach is saying the right thing, so they'll be in the same wavelength. That's the biggest part. I think the parents don't need to be neglected; they need to be embraced. I don't want to talk about parents negatively all the time. Some parents are wonderful and they do say the right things. They do just say, "I enjoyed watching you play today. I love watching you pass the ball." Saying encouraging things. Some parents are wonderful. It's just a minority that ruin it for not only their child but others involved. I've seen parents shout and scream from the sideline, and they don't solely impact their own child, but they impact others around them. I've had the players myself come off the field and say they're a bit scared that an opposing parent is shouting. So it influences everyone in the game. So we have to be careful in that minority. The majority parents, I think, are very educated in terms of letting their kids simply play and enjoy. I don't categorise their player to be the perfectionist player at U9s, U10. They understand the process becomes year in, year out.
So there was an article you posted that I'm really keen to kind of examine a bit more because it kind of ties up with a bit of my philosophy. So kind of discuss your perspective on long-term athlete development and kind of the myths and the challenges surrounding that.
There's one question I had during America that is based and emphasised a lot more in Canada and the US, and is probably most known to be long-term athletic development over there. That's why I keep referring to that, but it's the same thing. I've researched myself and read a lot about it. I wouldn't say I was an expert on the topic, but I've researched and read a lot about it, and I think it's a vague design to allow players to reach an elite status, at the same time allow them to be fully participating in sport for their lifespan. But I don't think it's individualized to a player. I think it's just for the average, or science likes averages, so they like to have a model for the averages. I don't think it's for individuals. So I think it's better if coach education programs educate coaches on how to implement this, how to use it in a coaching setting. I think that's important. But I think the model amplifies like individual characteristics in terms of we can develop through a stage, but it's quite vague to understand. So we have to do that research. I don't think many coaches necessarily have the time and knowledge to do the research because they have other things going on, because they're part-time coaches, they're volunteers, they're not paid, so they have other family stuff, personal stuff to get along with. But the model, I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The model itself is, in theory, I think, in my personal opinion, it's a good idea in terms of acknowledging the steps in order to reach elite status or participating in long life sport. I just think it's very, very, very vague in terms of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of my biggest bones to pick with long-term athlete development is it's kind of been embraced by a heck of a lot of sporting organisations. So the Rugby Football Union, the FA, Basketball England, all these kind of organisations. And actually, when you look at the science underpinning it, it's questionable at best. So obviously heavily based on the 10,000 hour rule, which if you look at the original kind of studies on that is really based on subjective forms, so music, violinist, etc. And actually, as you said, it's an average. So people have gone, brilliant, 10,000 hours is what we need to clock up. But number one, the big issue is it's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, which people kind of gloss over. And the second part is that's an average. So for some guys, it's 5,000. For other guys, it's 15,000.
Yeah.
As a friend of mine often says, he says, I can run. I've been running for 20 years. Doesn't mean I'm any good at it.
Yeah, there's actually, I don't know if you know, there's a golfer, I can't remember his name, in America. He's actually quit his full-time job to try this 10,000-hour rule. So he wants to be in the PGA Tour in America, and he hasn't a professional coach, and he's going to golf and practice golfing deliberately for 10,000 hours to see if it's true and if he can reach that elite level. I think so far he's on like 6,000 hours, and he's nowhere near to be able to participate in such an elite tournament. So I think if that does come true, I think it's obviously individualized to him. He might not have the skill or ability to actually become an elite golfer, but I think he will cause concerns for such theory. But I do think in theory I think it is something that you could implement, but it has to be within the right context in terms of educating the right people to use and utilize. I think it does vary on club to club if they want to. My club in America, they didn't emphasize it because they thought it doesn't cater individualized, and the whole trying to educate everyone would be too much of a facet. So they would just have no model at all and just coach the kids. And if someone did progress more than the other kids, he would be moved up to another age group and then used in a different age group and challenged that way. So they were doing it, I think, instinctively in terms of development. If a kid did progress, they'd move him on. But I don't think there's any single path for a kid to develop. I just think it depends on how good that natural talent is. Then you have that argument between, does he have natural talent, or is it learned, is it traded, is it developed? It's just that argument of you'll never know. I think it's just a good discussion to have with coaches.
I think essentially, like, you know, it's people kind of look into it, delve into it, and take it and extrapolate it really intensely. Yeah. And essentially, what that research is saying is, if you practice something intensely, you get better at it. Which, you know, it's kind of like, well, obviously,
it's quite vague in terms of that remark. And I've had it when I've attended coach education courses here and in the US, that they do reiterate the fact that this is important, that we do this and we follow this step by step. But they do that, say it, and then they move on to the next slide. There's no real education of why. What if a child is different to the next? What do we do if Johnny A is better than Ben number 2? And what do we do then if we want to progress both child? What if one child has parents that have growth in their genes? If the other child is 4'1" but doesn't grow and he is not fast, what do we do then? So I think there needs to be a greater amount of education in terms of educating coaches. I understand that these low, especially where I coach locally, these coaches are parents. They just want to do their level 1, level 2, and they don't want to progress. They just want to be with their son and their team. So I don't think they have that, I wouldn't call ambition, but have that need for that understanding of such theory. It's only when you go to the academies of elite academies that they have to understand the theory and how to differentiate that with different players of different age groups.
So one of the big kind of issues we had when I was at Wolves, so we, as a Category 1 FA Academy, we had to adhere to their kind of program, which was that every player had to be hitting a certain number of hours. So under 10s had to be hitting, I can't remember off the top of my head, but say it was 10 or 12 hours. 15s had to be hitting 16, 18 hours. And it was 10 hours of football, which if you're 8 to 10 years old, 10 hours of football, you're talking 2 hours, 5 nights a week. And actually, if you tie that into the LTAD theory, at that age group, you're not meant to be doing one activity for 10 hours a week. You're meant to be doing gymnastics, swimming, running, athletics. So you've taken part of the theory, and then but we're going to leave this other bit.
That's why I think that education needs to come in, and then it becomes that argument of, does specialising in sport become better than multi-sport or playing a lot of sports? In America, they do play 6 or 7 sports, and I found it a challenge in terms of some players, for example, play ice hockey, and they would be a goalkeeper. They would have a different technique to save the puck in terms of then would, in contrast, go to a soccer goal, and they would do the same. So they'd use and incorporate different techniques from other sports into soccer. Some would work, some would not, and some would interfere with their development, some would maybe adhere to it and enhance their development. So that becomes an argument then for coaches of, does my son play a lot of sports, do they not? So there's a lot of argument discussion to it. Personally, I would like to follow such a model, but then I just try to be very careful how I follow it. It's something that I do show parents in terms of, I highlight the need for things I've taken step by step to reach the top. In terms of this year, we're going to focus on how to learn the foundation part. But then we're going to learn how to train. Then we're going to learn how to compete. Then to win. Then you might reach the top. So it's stage by stage. And parents then understand that in order to reach that top, we have to go through these stages. That's how vague I probably portray that theory, because I didn't want to overwhelm them.
And that kind of ties into your idea of actually at this level, it's about participation and love of the game, and just being ready to train, just being able to train. And
the biggest thing was when I referred it to an education system, which I try to be in the education system in terms of I get to observe teachers in diverse settings, and I could get to observe them teaching in different ways with a classroom full of mixed abilities in terms of their learning, in terms of how they learn, in terms of their maturity. So it's interesting for me to sit there and watch this happening on a day-to-day basis. So I referred the LTAD model to education in terms of you get taught something every single year to progress onto the next year, hopefully, as vague as that sounds. But eventually, every year you learn something to reach a certain level to sit your exams. I refer to it, imagine if you were a 9-year-old being told, we need to win at all costs, but you're going to sit your GCSEs or you're going to sit your final grades at 9 years old to become the best, and they fail. So I refer to it as every year they need to progress to something in order to enter the next stage of development, in order to reach the long-term stage of sitting an exam in an education setting, or in soccer to reach college soccer or high school soccer. I think that really set stone of what I was trying to accomplish there.
I think I did a post recently on this, but one of the biggest kind of maybe red herrings in sport is early success. So people, there's a plethora of people out there who are world champion at the age of 14.
Yeah.
Now, at senior level, they're absolutely nowhere to be seen. But there's this assumption that because I'm a world champ at 14, naturally, at senior level, I'm going to crack through and I'm going to be the best of the best. Yeah. And there's the same thing with kind of football, and you're starting to see the emergence of players like Chris Smalling, Jamie Vardy. I mean, most recently, these guys who have had to work through, levels, going around at the less than ideal route, if you would say.
Yeah.
And actually, in terms of their development, you could argue that Jamie Vardy's doing a heck of a lot more than someone like Tom Cleverley, who's come through Man United, played at England under 21 level, made a couple of caps, but then fallen away.
Yeah.
That actually, their trajectory is very different.
It's interesting that then you have to then discuss the fact of his individualised, and if Vardy got taught in a different setting, he enjoyed the game, he fell in love with the game because it wasn't that competitive. He played at a local league where he could enjoy the game itself, and he did say in an interview that he incorporates what he used to play in non-league into how he plays in the Premier League. They haven't made him to be a robot in terms of being a Man United robot. I do find some academies, from my experiences, they try and teach a player to play in a certain way. They intervene, it sort of limit their options in terms of their development. They want to be a certain type of player. I think where Vardy and these late developers come through the non-league route, they typically just get told to play and play the way they want to. They don't get refined. That's how I feel with people like Tom Cleverley. They get refined into the Manchester United way, which they've developed a lot of amazing players. But sometimes it becomes too limited in terms of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You sort of you fit into a system, but when you're no longer in that system, how does that translate to Everton or
I read a book
Villa?
Pep and the way he wanted to develop players at Barcelona. He didn't want players to develop and only to play for Barcelona. If they get released, he wanted players to be able to, if they do get released, to go and play for another team and still be able to play for that team, not being so limited to only play for one team. He didn't want to create a Barcelona player that can only play for one team. If he wanted to educate them in terms of how to play football and how to then impact that in a game and implement that to game no matter what team or what level they play at, which I found very interesting. If a Barcelona category 1, if I guess they are in Spain, I want them to be similar in my coaching. I want to educate players to participate, to have fun, and if they can then play in any way they want it to in terms of levels and abilities and academies or teams.
Interesting. So what's your kind of long-term vision for the Sporting Influencer as a blog?
My next aim would try and do more stuff like this and engage people and engage more people with audiences and being more adaptive in what kind of content I upload in terms of videos, me speaking a bit more and becoming less of a keyboard warrior in terms of writing everything down, and I want to be more engaging. I also want to try and create events that parents can attend for free. So like probably if they call them coach education or parent education nights, where parents can show up for an hour or half an hour of their time and educate them in terms of how to be a positive parent on the sideline. That would be my aim in the next year or two. The long-term aim, the sporting influencer has to be more about the core identity of why I began the whole process of trying to educate parents. Sometimes I do feel that I go off track and I talk about coaching stuff or how to score a goal. I want it to be purely about the parent, how they can influence a child's level of performance and enjoyment in sport. So long term is staying true to my beliefs and core values, why I started.
It's funny because I kind of had this thing when I started mine, which was I'm going to write some stuff down. If people read it, great. If they don't, great. And you can kind of start to maneuver and go, what do people want to read? And then actually come back to, well, do you know what? That was never my purpose in the first place.
Yeah.
My purpose in the first place was, if no one reads it, I don't really care. But I'm just writing this to get my thoughts down on paper. So yeah, you're right. It's this kind of balance.
When I started, it was all about maybe having someone interested. When I first had my 10 first views, I was ecstatic. I thought this is wonderful. People are starting to read my stuff. Now I've hit the 10,000 views. I'm confident that people are aware of what I'm trying to aim and what I'm trying to influence in terms of parents and educating them. I do have some negative feedback from some parents saying that 20 years ago you might scream and shout at a child and they'd be fine. But then the argument is that's 20 years ago. Things have changed now.
I hate that about football. If there's one bone I've got to pick, so you run into that all the time in strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
So people say, George Best didn't need to do strength and conditioning. No, he didn't. But he played 40 years ago, and players aren't the same anymore.
He only probably lasted about 8 years of elite sport.
Exactly. Like now, if you look at the stature of players and the size of them, if Jaap Stam liking George Best, I don't think George Best would be doing the things he would have done.
Never.
You get players like that. It's a different level now. It's not, the game's changed. You can't think in terms of 40 years ago. You look now at what people like Ronaldo are doing to be at the best of the best.
Yeah.
He's getting every single little percent.
He's trying to look at people like Ryan Giggs when he was in that stage 20 years ago where he didn't do strength and conditioning, but how he evolved into understanding that he had to maintain his body and his shape and his nutrition, and then how he did change. He then progressed into playing the game a bit longer than he would have if he didn't.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Ryan Giggs, you have other players of the same caliber that wanted to change their way and play for a longer period of time, which is something that we do hate about sport. That they do challenge things from the past where we should be embraced in the future. So when I do write these blogs, it's about obviously developing the next generation of soccer players, but it's also using a parent as an embracing factor of having that child to enjoy the sport and having that relationship with parents.
So in terms of yourself as a coach, who or multiple people, who would you say has been your biggest influences as a coach?
This was a hard question because I didn't want to list about 40, 50 people, which is fine, but I wanted to narrow it down to the two most important people, and I refer back to my old PE teacher, my physical education teacher in high school. He had this aura about him that there's no fear about him. He's approachable. He could be there no matter what time of day. I could approach him to speak about every single topic. He understood me as a person. He knew my mother. He knew my father. He knew my background. So I really feel appreciated by him. No matter how I felt that day, I didn't want to train. All he asked was try your best. All I want is you to try your best. Understand that if you do your best, you will improve. And just simple words, like concise words like that, really spurred me on to do better. And that's the only subject in school that I've really evolved at and embraced. Other subjects I found hard. I didn't like the traditional classroom setting. I found it hard to sit there and really, especially at university level as well, where some lecturers typically stand there and read the presentation. I found that really hard to be fully engaging in for an hour. So when the practical elements of physical activity came, where I could lead, I could speak, I can communicate with people, I found that something of a natural for me. So he was one of my biggest influences to be as a coach, and I always speak to him now, and I always use what he did, and I try and be approachable to all the kids I coach, the men I try and coach. I want to be approachable, I want to communicate with them. I don't want it to be my way or the highway. So his attributes I do use a lot.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you highlighted someone in terms of that sort of age, because I think it's really interesting, those kind of formative years, like when you start to become aware of who you are and how people perceive you and those kind of things. Most people pick up someone in that age. So the first interview that I did was with a really good friend of mine, Louis Lett, who's a volleyball coach, and he spun around on me and said, "What about you?" And actually, if I was to go right back down to what was the turning point for my progression into strength and conditioning, it was a coach I had when I was about that sort of age, 14 to 16. He was an S&C coach from Yugoslavia, Serbia now, or Croatia even, sorry. He wouldn't like me saying that. But he was a guy that was different. You know, things were very different, but he was interested. He was an interesting guy, and I think it's that kind of thing. I don't know who said it, but that thing about people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that interest.
Yeah. That fact of that he cared really spurred me on to attend his classes. I wanted to be there every single class. I wanted to be there first. I wanted to be his friend. I wanted for him to embrace the fact that I wanted to learn. There was that respect, that relationship. Obviously, student teacher athlete relationship, but there was that kind of embracing a teacher because he cared for me. But other lecturers, teachers, I found I was either a number on a spreadsheet or I was an individual that they wanted to mark my paper, and that's it. He really took time to understand my background and who I was from. Any personal problems I might have, he would know about before I even know about it. He would just know everything. Then my second would be the professor I was lucky enough to meet in America, Professor Valerie Worley. She works at Sacred Heart University, a sports exercise science lecturer. She really wanted to understand why I coach. She always debriefed me after sessions, always trying to understand the core values of what I was trying to accomplish in sessions, in games, trying to understand what I did. So I was debriefing myself and speaking to her. At the same time, I was making sense of all the methods I tried to use, the approaches I tried to use. And she listened, she offered advice. And as a result, she offered me to lecture at Sacred Heart in Connecticut. So I was given the opportunity to walk in there and speak about coaching and how to make the most of your time whilst you coach and not to waste time and really make the time efficient and effective, not to waste time talking too much and making line drills and talking to them about your past life and just letting them simply play. So I was very fortunate to have those key influences in my life, especially ones that was at both stages of my life. One at that early stage of 14, 16 when I was trying to perceive myself as someone. Then now I was trying to understand that I wanted to be a coach. And she was from an educational background and a science background where she would quite try and make sense of the theories I was trying to use. So both at different parts of my life really came together for me to sort of improve and move on. So I'm very fortunate to meet very, very valuable people in terms of that.
Really interesting. So we talked a bit about your successes and failures. So what are the challenges that you face at the moment in terms of the kind of coaching practice, the sporting influence? So what are the things that you're having to navigate in terms of issues?
In terms of coaching locally, I find it hard in terms of changing a mindset again, but from reflective and trying to look back at what I did with that team. I try and take a layer at a time. I'm very patient in terms of trying to educate them slowly. They do talk about winning and trying to talk about competition and trying to win the trophy the next tournament. They do talk about that a lot. I've got to just rein myself back and one session at a time, one game at a time, and educate them slowly. That's the biggest task right now, because I think the mentality locally here has always been the same. For the last 30, 40 years, it's always been about winning at all costs, no matter what age. There's actually a tournament tomorrow where at U8 it's competitive and you can win the trophy. So for me, that's going to be hard to turn up and see these parents scream and shout. But I'm going to turn up to so maybe to speak to them on why they approach the game this way. But that's the biggest challenge right now I face coaching professionally or part-time, is trying to change your mindset. With a sporting influencer, my biggest challenge right now is not to speak about a certain topic again and again, to try and find new ways to engage readers, trying to use different topics of engaging parents, not to be too negative. I found the first few blogs I read were based so negatively that it might discourage people from reading them because they were like, whoa, negative. So I want to balance it from a standpoint where there can be positive engagements of really good parents and how they do intervene in games, and the negative side and having that balance of how to move together.
Okay. So what advice would you give to coaches of young athletes? So people who are watching this who are maybe football coaches or even coaches of other sports, what sort of kind of tips would you give them?
My biggest tip would be that a child can only be a child once in their life, so let them simply play the game. Don't play the game through your eyes. Let them self-discover the game. Let them learn. Let them be with their friends. Let them have fun. Just simply play the game.
Fantastic. So in terms of parents, because that's kind of your specialty, what advice would you give parents? Would it be the same, or would you have a different twist on it?
It would be the same, but I would add to it that I understand they've been through past experiences that they've played the game. I would then ask them for patience in terms of development. I would educate them in terms of development, and I would educate them in letting them have a role in the setting of the coaching practice. Let them become involved in the practices in terms of being, I don't know, a cone, be a player. So they're playing with their son in a way. When I coached in Cardiff, when the children came in, for the first 5 minutes, I would let their parents come in with them to play, so they could have that bonding time, a relation time with them. And I would tell the parents of what the session was about quickly, and then they would try and teach them quickly. Then I would ask them to leave, and they'd be our session together. So really involve the parents and simply letting the kids play and letting them have their childhood.
Okay, so are there any books or resources you would recommend for people out there who are coaching kids or involved in the kind of youth development aspect? Anything that comes to mind?
I've been fortunate enough to reach and meet a professor called Robin Jones in Cardiff Met University, he's written a lot of books. So the two books I've really emphasised coaches of various levels to read would be Understanding Sports Coaching and Introduction to Sports Coaching. Really get an idea of the different methods you might want to use, the development side of it, the theories that you might want to implement, and understand why and the benefits of implementing these different techniques. And also there's a website called Sports Parenting from the US that's very, very good, and they've been around for a number of years and have created a lot of audience and a lot of attention. I would highlight them as one of the key places to go to find resources, to learn new content and progress as a parent.
Do you know what? I think I actually just came across them yesterday. I completely independently of this conversation. I think I came across them on Facebook. I look at their website. So it's very timely you said that.
Yeah, very timely.
So what's next for Richard Cashman? So you mentioned a master's. What's your master's going to be in?
My master's going to be in sports coaching, which my degree was based upon. I remember when I was doing my degree, I done a personal presentation to a lecturer, and he asked the same things, I think 5 years ago. What's my 5-year plan? At the time, I was a level 1 coach doing my degree, and I wanted to create my personal coaching philosophy. I wanted to go to America. 5 years on, nearly in my last year of this process, I've been to America for 2 years. I've started to create my own coaching philosophy, which will evolve over years, and with experiences in education, it will evolve. I'm a level 2 coach. I will be on my B license in September, and I'm doing my masters. So it is evolved. I've stated and I've stayed true to my commitment of saying them out loud and being true to my values. So for the next 5 years, I want to complete my masters. I want to do my B license, and I want to coach in a different country. And hopefully, my biggest aim is to do a PhD about parental involvement in sport. That would be my ultimate aim in the next 5 to 6 years, if it's possible. But I never thought a degree would be possible. So
yeah, it's funny. Do you know what? I was adamant I wasn't going to university either, and I ended up doing a master's. So you know,
there's always
you suddenly realise your mind changes.
Yeah, when I was in high school, they sort of refused me entrance to sixth form because they thought I'd been better suited to a more specific course in college. And I thought, they don't know what they're talking about. When I attended college, it was something that I really enjoyed doing. It's something that I really focused on. Then I thought, why not just let's do a degree? And now I'm going into a master's, so I think it does connect. When you're looking back, all these things do connect.
So where can people find out more about you, about the Sporting Influencer, about your kind of resources?
The people can find more about the Sporting Influencer by the Facebook page, the Sporting Influencer. We have our own Twitter page called the Sporting Inf 1, and our website would be www.sportinginfluencer.wordpress.com. where people can find content, varying content, videos, blogs, questionnaires, personal experiences from America of how I coached in America, what challenges I faced. Also some experimenting videos about how I reverse the roles of parent and player. So please check it out and find out how to become a better sporting influencer.
Fantastic. Well, I feel like we could talk for hours because I feel like we've got a lot of similar philosophies. But thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm sure the people watching have picked up some good tips, and hopefully get some more people kind of aligning along the same kind of philosophy and mindset.
Thank you for allowing me to speak and expressing my opinions and philosophies and my experiences. Thank you.
Absolutely not a problem. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.